Hi, my name is Andre and welcome to 10,000 Pictures. So far, we learned that to take a picture, we need to let a certain amount of light to get in touch with the sensor. To do that, we must regulate the duration of exposure with the shutter, the intensity of the light with the aperture, and the sensitivity of the sensor with the ISO. Those three elements work together and are inversely proportional. This means that if we increase one, we must decrease the other to maintain the balance. Therefore, when you increase your aperture in one stop, you have to slow down your shutter in the same amount to keep the same exposure. Stop is the measurement of exposure. When we add one stop, we're doubling the amount of light let in the camera. Consequently, half the light is used when you subtract a stop. In practical terms, if image is perfectly exposed at aperture f11, shutter 1/30 and ISO 200 and is still getting blurry, we must increase the shutter speed to a safe setting. Switching the shutter speed to 1/125 should fix the problem. But now, our picture will be underexposed. In order to keep the 125 in the shutter and maintain the exposure balance, we need to change the aperture, ISO, or both. From 1/30 to 1/125 is a 2-stop jump. That means that now we are just allowing 1/4 of the original amount of light into the camera. The picture will probably look dark and underexposed. To maintain the balance, we need to compensate the other elements. Considering only the aperture now, since we increased 2 stops on the shutter, we need to subtract 2 stops on the aperture. So instead of f11, we should open the diaphragm to f5.6. The picture should be well exposed again. If you wanted to keep the f11, you could increase the ISO in 2 stops, from 200 to 800, or you could split the difference and open the aperture to f8 and ISO to 400. That shows us that stops are interchangeable, and we can manipulate all three to give the picture the aesthetical features that we desire. We already know that each element has its own characteristics, and some of them are considered undesirable in some situations. We have to take that in consideration when deciding which configuration to use. If your shutter speed is too low, your picture might be blurry, either from the movement of the camera or the subject. In that case, try widening your aperture or increasing your ISO. Now, if you need more or less depth of field, balance with your shutter or ISO. When your shutter and aperture are set and the picture is still underexposed, increase your ISO. Modern cameras allow you to adjust shutter, aperture, and ISO in increments of 1/3 of a stop. So every time you turn the dial 3 times up or down, you're changing the value in one stop. Knowing the full stop values can be tricky at first. For the shutter, the numbers are approximated. Every time the value is double, one stop is increased. For example, from 1/15 to 1/30, or from 1/60 to 1/125. The same happens with the ISO. One stop means double the value, from 50 to 100, to 200 to 400, to 800 to 1600, and so on. For aperture, it's a little more complicated because of how the f numbers are calculated. A stop doesn't relate to doubling or halving, but multiplying or dividing by 1.4. For example, 2.8 times 1.4 equals to 4. So f4 is one stop over f2.8. After f4, there's f5.6, f8, f11, f16, and f22. Most photographers memorize those values. It's also helpful to carry a cheat sheet with you for a quick check. Once again, keep in mind that most cameras allow you to change in increments of 1/3. So every 3 turns on the dial equals 1 stop. We established that the 3 elements of photography obey a reciprocity rule. When we add 1 stop to one element, we have to decrease a stop on the other to maintain the exposure balance. Every time you increase a stop, you're doubling the amount of light on the camera. Consequently, the lights halve when you decrease a stop. The reciprocity rule is especially useful when you need to prioritize one of the elements. A fast shutter to freeze the action, for example, or a shallow depth of field for a portrait. When the light is measured, shift your setting to the desired value and make the necessary adjustments on the other settings to maintain the balance. Stop values are approximated when you double or halve your ISO or shutter, you're adding or subtracting 1 stop. On the aperture, 1 stop equals to multiplying or dividing the value by 1.4. Cameras allow you to increment stops in 1/3. That means that every 3 turns on the dial equals 1 stop. But for the sake of agility, simply memorize the stop values. For practice, take the same picture with different settings. See the variance that different configurations translate onto the image. This is a very useful concept, so get familiarized with it. Next week, we'll have a better understanding of how focus and depth of field work and how to take advantage of it. That's it for today, and if you like it, share it with your friends, subscribe, and be part of the conversation. See you next time on 10,000 Pictures.